Okay, Dr. Jaffe. So obviously, in this episode, you and I will be talking about how to really overcome the challenge of addiction, right? But prior to getting into that, we have to talk about your story because your story is extremely interesting. Like it's quite intense. You know, it's almost movie-like. You know what I mean? I really, really enjoyed going through your book. So if you can just tell people the different life events that took place in your life that led you to want to really help people overcome this challenge of addiction, how would you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say that, thank you for having me on. I also, in the field that I work in, a lot of people get into helping because they've struggled with it themselves. I'm certainly nowhere near unique in that context. Um, but yeah, my life started off pretty normal. I mean, I grew up in Israel, which right now saying it out loud means a lot more to different people than it
Mm-hmm.
did, a few years back, even though it's always been a heavily politicized area of the world. But for me, it was just where I grew up, right? It was the neighborhood I grew up in. So, grew up in Tel Aviv, lived in the same apartment till I was 14 years old. My dad was a physician. My mom worked in a bank. It was a very upper middle class upbringing in Israel with whatever that meant over there. So, a westernized country, but, you know, at the same time as you go to the pizza parlor in your local little like area mall to go grab food with your sister or your friends. My dad was also in military service until we left the country, right? And would be gone once a month for a week for military training. And I lived through a couple of different, I'll call them smaller wars, but still, when you're a kid, you don't really know what a small war is. So just wars. But that was my upbringing coming up. I was precocious. Like I had a bunch of friends, played around a lot. Really, really normal upbringing. And then right before the age of 14, we moved to the States. My dad got recruited to work in a hospital. Initially, we were going to move to West Virginia, and then eventually ended up being Chicago, just because the guy who hired him uh, started up. He was an obstetrician and OBGYN. Started an OBGYN department at the University of Chicago Hospital. So my parents come to us and say, "Hey, do you want to go to America?" I don't know if you are native or not, but for a lot of immigrants, the idea, especially this is 30 some years ago, the idea of going to America was just like dream come true sort of a thing. So yeah, it sounded like a great adventure. We all jumped on a plane. There was obviously some months of planning, but my parents did all that. I was 14 years old, and we ended up in Chicago. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was moving right into high school. And so a lot of upheaval, right? Think all the friends you had always in your life, the same friends in the same neighborhood playing out, they're all gone. The language, different, right? And I ended up not struggling externally. I think people thought I was doing okay, but inside my head, all the social anxieties and all these things that I already had got exacerbated. I won't get into a ton of detail, but because you can get that in the book, but I'll get to the stuff that
Yeah.
matters. It was in that freshman and sophomore year of high school I found alcohol, and I tell the story in the book, but alcohol really helped fix my social anxiety and made me much less socially anxious and able to relate to others and play and be, pick up girls, whatever, all the stuff that you kind of want to do when you're 14 years old. Um, by the time I was 16, that led me to weed also. So now I was drinking and smoking weed. By the time I got to college, I was smoking weed every day, drinking close to every day, and really relying on those two things to manage my anxiety, low energy, high energy, etc. And it worked from inside. It felt like it worked really, really well. The
Mm-hmm.
problem was I was not really doing well in school. I was ditching classes. I was feeling, hungover and wasn't going to all my work. My grades were starting to slip. Then I had a breakup, what I consider a pretty bad breakup, but you girlfriend from high school, go to college. She ended up finding somebody that she wanted to date more. They're married to this day, so I feel good at least about that breakup.
Mm-hmm.
But she broke up with me, bad depression, started leading on heavier drugs, coke, but also ecstasy and mushrooms and acid and all this other stuff. And just now I'm using all the time, every day. Really, really getting in a dark place in my head. All that then became I ended up moving. This is in upstate New York. I ended up moving to Los Angeles, And when I went to Los Angeles, I was now far from my family, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I ended up finding meth, which was the drug that was my drug of choice, and literally staying up 3 days, 4 days at a time. I mean, insane. But I was spending so much money on drugs, I decided to start selling drugs. I'd sold a little weed when I was in college earlier on, but started selling drugs and selling a lot of drugs. Became pretty good and pretty successful at selling drugs. Um, was making in college, I was making over $100,000 a year selling.
Mm.
By the time I got out of college, it was up to 250, 300 more thousand a year. I had guys selling for me now, we're doing big deals. And it was kind of this interesting, right? Part of it is a quote unquote business, but it's also a very dark side of society, right? Got introduced to a lot of crime, got held up at gunpoint, got robbed, got beat up, got guns myself. And then the way the book opens is a SWAT team arrest at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, just a few months after I think it was my 25th birthday. And that was really the beginning of the the end of that career and me really having to figure out the rest of my life. And so that's what got me to have a lot of lived experience, right? From the age of 14, 15 to the age of 26. I wasn't sober much. And and then the rest of some of the stuff we'll talk about here is what I did to get to the other side of that. But that's what got my interest in helping people who find themselves stuck like I did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, your comeback story is really inspiring because I mean, obviously, like when I first saw your work, I mean, I never expected that would be your, I guess, years during your teenage years and your early to mid 20s. So we will definitely talk about how you broke out of that because I mean, that's obviously something that's going to help a lot of people, right? So
For
with
sure.
you,
I
it
hope.
seemed like, yeah, hopefully, yeah. So it seemed like the lack of stability was something that really caused that first few steps into addiction, right? You know, with alcohol, then weed, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, you've been in this space for quite some time. What other, I guess, first, or like what other triggers lead to that? You know, obviously, again, for you, it was lack of stability, but what other triggers are there? Just, I guess, so people are aware of it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we're getting into now is my whole point really in writing my second book. And I think it might be worth just kind of pausing for a second. When most people look at somebody who struggles with addiction, like I was addicted to meth there in the end, right? When most people look at that, they say you have a meth problem. If you're addicted to cocaine, you have a cocaine problem. If you're addicted to alcohol, you're an alcoholic. You have an alcohol problem. And that's how we split up addictions in terms of diagnosis. What that's created is the focus is on the behavior, it's on the drug. So back then, people would have said, he's addicted to meth. We got to stop his meth use. The question you're asking right now is, well, why? Why do people get addicted? And to me, that question is not only more interesting, but is also the opening of the solutions for addiction. So I know the answers to what you're asking me now, but when I started, I had no idea. And a lot of people who go to get treatment for addictions, they get told that their problem is with gambling or with porn. They don't understand that their problem is with the world. And so in my book, Unhooked, what I explain is you say you're hooked on cocaine, but you're not hooked on cocaine. You're not hooked on alcohol. You're not hooked on porn or video games. What you're hooked on is the relief that those things give you from inner struggle. So you asked, what are some of the triggers? I talk about them in the book at length. There's a whole section that discusses a slew of them, but I'll give some. Negative self-image and negative self-talk, right? People who don't think they're good enough, they think they're losers, they're dumb, they're ugly, they're fat. Like pick a negative self-talk track. There are thousands of them, but they all follow the same idea. I'm not good enough. People aren't going to care about me, or I'm going to be alone. People are not going to love me. People are not going to want to be with me. I'm never going to succeed, right? That kind of idea. So that's the negative self talk track. Another version is looking at others and thinking really poorly of others. What do I mean by that? Like other people aren't trustworthy. Other people are going to screw me. I can't trust anybody because if I do, they're going to take advantage of me. So that's another version of things. A third one that I talk about in the book, the world. A lot of people have an image of the world as being a very dark place. Now, as I'm saying all these things, what I talk about in the book is those didn't come out of nowhere. They got developed through experiences, through your biological genetic makeup, through the environment you were born into. But I'm just giving really big picture kind of ideas. If you think the world is evil and dark and is out to get you, you're going to feel pretty bad internally, and then you're going to need to cover that up. So each one of those, I just gave three categories, but each one of
Yeah.
those is a reason why people feel really uncomfortable or scared or anxious or pained inside, and then they look for something to help fix it. Now, all of us have some of this inside of us, right? Rarely do you find a person that has none of the three categories I just talked about, and there are other categories in the book too, but rarely do you find a person who has none of them. People who struggle with addiction typically have a lot of that. And then the other really important piece is at some point early in life, like I did with alcohol and weed, for instance, they found that a substance, when you take it, fixes the thing that they struggle with inside. I didn't know to call the struggle I had inside social anxiety. I was 15 years old. I didn't know what the hell social anxiety was. But I knew that when I drank alcohol, I could talk to girls. I didn't, when I had conversations with friends, I wasn't constantly wondering what they were thinking about me and judging me. So the voice in my head quieted down. That felt like medicine for me. And there are a lot of examples for different people.
God, yeah. So that's really interesting, and that kind of really relates to something else that you speak about in the book, where you mentioned that when you were getting your PhD, you were taught that an addiction is a result of someone's brain chemistry and their genetics, right? But then you also mentioned that you kind of later found out that that was a picture that wasn't fully complete in terms of how you were taught. So can you dive deeper into that and then tell us like what you really mean by that and what led you to that conclusion?
Yeah, so UCLA is a great school, and its focus in psychology and therapy is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapeutic approaches, but then a lot of brain science and genetics, right? And they have centers for those, so that explains why you get a lot of people on this what they're studying. So yeah, the idea was people who have addiction issues have dopaminergic and other neurophysiological and neurochemical um, variations in how their brain functions. And it's those variations, whether they were genetic or brought about by exposure to drugs or other potential things in the world, it's those variations that make them less able to resist drugs or resist addictions. That was the idea. And yeah, I mean, they talked about socioeconomic status and environments, but it was downplayed. They talked about um, learning, but the idea that so much of this learning comes from early on in somebody's developmental period, like 1 year old, 2 year old, three, four, five, six, seven, right? That was never really discussed much, other than people who have, parents who have addiction issues are more likely to be addicts. But then is it because of the genetics? Is it because of the biology, or is it because of learning? It was the leaning was definitely more on the biology. And look, I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't wise enough at the time to really question a lot of that. I just kind of bought it. And what I realized through time is while many of the explanations described what was different about people with addiction problems than about people without addiction problems, they didn't necessarily speak to the how they got their piece. And I think that ends up being, in my opinion, A, important, B, really relevant for how they're going to get out of it. So I'll give one example. Everybody believes that addiction happens because of dopamine. And sometimes you'll even hear people be very, very specific about this. Like, I use cocaine because cocaine releases dopamine. My brain likes the dopamine, and that's why I'm addicted. Okay? So that's the rationale a lot of people use. Well, you know what else releases dopamine? A really nice meal. You know what else releases dopamine? Sex and video games and watching football on TV and jumping up and down on trampolines, right? Like everything that the body and the brain consider positive and relatively unexpected, I'll just say, releases dopamine. So the fact that dopamine is released by cocaine Doesn't really explain why that person became addicted to cocaine. Um, Everything else they do in their life also releases dopamine. And so we just get stuck in this idea of, well, this sounds like a really easy explanation. Let's stop there. It's not wrong. The dopamine release definitely has something to do with the addiction, but I don't even think it has 50% to do with it. And
Really?
the problem then is A, you start looking for differences people have in how their dopamine functions in their brain. And there are a lot of differences, and they're not all linked, and definitely not all linked strongly to more and less addiction. And the second piece, and this is what is more important to me, we've been looking for a way to intervene at the dopamine level. Like we've been looking for a way to fix that dopamine question and help people fix their addiction for 25 years or longer. No usable results. Nothing. So it's like people are saying to themselves, as if I can just figure out a way to fix this dopamine thing, addiction will be fixed. Well, first of all, you can't. You haven't found a way. Secondly, while you're looking, there's so many other things we can do to make addiction better, but we're not looking to do them because we just believe in the genetics and the dopamine theory. So I think we screw people over by pretending somewhere there's going to be a silver bullet. There's not a silver bullet. People have hard lives. They experience hard things. Those hard things cause them pain. They don't like being in pain, so they do something to relieve the pain. If they do that thing to relieve the pain over and over and over and over and over for years, it can become an addiction or a compulsive behavior. That's it. Now go fix
Mm-hmm.
the hard things, and you can potentially help people with their addictions.
Got it. Okay. So one thing that people might say to that, just to, I guess, play, like the devil's
Okay,
advocate.
sure. Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. So they say that oftentimes the dopamine release that comes with drugs is stronger than any other natural form of release, right? So they kind of use that as the point to make when it comes down to addiction because nothing else can really replace that dopamine release. So what would you say to that? I guess to kind of because like that's a main argument that people use when they kind of really go down that route of using dopamine as the answer. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's why I gave some of the examples I gave. So that's not true for
Mm-hmm.
sex, but people get addicted to sex,
Mm.
right? That's not true for
Interesting.
food, but
Yeah.
people get addicted to food. So
Uh huh. Okay.
why? So it works whether you're hacking the system or you're using the same system. Now, again, by the way, I think there are reasons for all those things. And I don't know if we have time
Yeah.
here to unpack them, but there are reasons for all that. So that's the problem is when you look for a single answer, it'll make all the sense in the world. And the reason what you just said makes sense is here. So the way cocaine interferes with dopamine is it makes dopamine leak out. So you're right. It releases more dopamine. The issue is that's not really how your brain is used to reacting to dopamine. What do I mean by that? Um, we all listen here, I'll give an example. We all listen to music, right? Music has specific notes in a specific rhythm, and it's those notes in a specific rhythm that create music, right? That's what music is. It's not true that just turning the volume up or playing more notes at different like with a at a constant rhythm will make you like music more or enjoy it better, right? Like the sound of a classic violinist playing, the sound of a house music track playing, a hip hop track playing, those are all music. Different people like different ones, right? They have um, preferences. A plane going over your head, 500 feet over your head, is louder than any one of those things you would ever play, right? Just because there's more noise doesn't mean it does anything to the system. Like you like the sound of the plane less. Your brain just being flooded with dopamine doesn't mean it's doing more of what dopamine normally does. Does that make sense at all?
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is not meant to take on. It's meant to take dopamine signals in like a Morse code. Like boop boop boop
Yeah.
boop. Like that's how it's supposed to read it. So when you just flood it with dopamine, sure, it's full for longer. But I don't think we've shown in any way, shape, or form that dopamine receptors being full for longer means the brain likes them more. Because we don't. Does that make sense?
Huh. Yeah, because it's like okay, mm, so like yeah, I mean obviously the point that you made about getting addicted to porn or sex or drugs or food, it's all different. But again, it is an addiction, right? Now each person tends to go down each route, and again, is it because of their specific brain chemistry, as you're saying, because each brain will, I guess, find more relief down a specific path of I guess of their choice that suits their brain chemistry? Like, is that what you're saying here?
100%.
Okay,
100%.
got it, got it,
So
got it.
the thing is more the match between the relief and the struggle
Got
you
it.
have, right? Like if I'm experiencing anxiety regularly and you give me cocaine, I'm probably not going to relieve my anxiety a lot, and I'm not going to like cocaine. By the way, this is an N of one study that I'm about to give you right here. I personally, even when I was selling drugs and was selling from bricks of cocaine, pure Colombian cocaine, I don't like coke. Not my drug, right? I got the cleanest drugs. I could I could literally use as much of the cocaine as I wanted and it would do nothing for my money. Didn't like it. And so it's not the dopamine of the cocaine. Otherwise, I would have gotten addicted to cocaine. I had as much of it as I wanted. I used it a handful of times. Don't like it to this day. Not a drug that I enjoy. So that's what people are missing, right? Now, again, what people would say, well, there could be genetic variants that explain that. Sure, there could be, but there could be something much simpler. You got anxiety, you like drugs that reduce anxiety. You got emotional pain, you like drugs that reduce emotional pain. You feel overwhelmed with emotions, you like drugs that numb your emotions, right? Like there's a much simpler explanation than looking in a haystack for things we haven't found. We haven't found a cocaine preference gene. Haven't found it at all. So I think we're looking down the wrong path. Biology matters. It's not that biology doesn't matter, but it's not 100% of the picture. It's not even 80% of the picture. I don't think it's 50% of the picture. It's, for different people, it could be from 10% to 40, 50% of the picture, but that's individually varied. And I think we're just barking up the wrong tree over and over.
Got it. Okay, now have you noticed like a pattern that leads people to drugs, to porn, to sex, to binge eating? Like, is there a certain pattern that you've noticed, that leads people down specific pathways, or is it just kind of random?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I've noticed a pattern where specific individuals you can tell ahead of time. This is another part of the equation, right? Um, where you can tell ahead of time, oh, if they're going to get addicted to, they get addicted to something. But here's the reason why. Look, you seem like a highly functioning person. I'm here, other than being tired. I'm a highly functioning person, right? Doing pretty well in life. Life is good. It's all great. It's not like we walk around carrying a sign of what our inner struggles are. And so maybe if I work with somebody incredibly deeply over a long period of time before they ever develop issues, I can start unraveling the inner pain, the inner struggle, right? The hooks that I talk about, so that I can start understanding where they may get their relief from. But nobody comes to talk to me until after they get in trouble. So that's the problem with a lot of these studies. When they've done studies trying to follow people from an early age, there have been no predictors of what drug they'll get into. The best predictors, what drugs are around, right? If you're in a neighborhood that has a
Mm,
lot of cocaine
yeah.
and alcohol, odds are you'll end up using cocaine and alcohol. If you're in a neighborhood that has a lot of weed, odds are you'll end up using weed because that's what's around. So in countries that are really poor, people use gasoline and glue and paint thinner because they don't have access to cocaine. Cocaine's expensive. They don't have access to weed. But put a little gasoline on a rag and breathe it, and you get high, right? Put paint thinner
I didn't
in
know
a
that.
bag and breathe it, you get high. So people use whatever gives them relief from whatever they need relief from.
Got it. Okay, so you just mentioned something about hooks, right? Which is obviously a pretty big theme in your book. So can you go a bit deeper on hooks and just tell us what that really is and why is it important to understand if we want to really understand this challenge of addiction?
So I'll give an example from one of the ones that I talked about earlier. If you believe that you're a POS and you're a loser and nobody will ever like you, that got implanted at some point. A baby's not born with that notion, right? A baby's not born with the idea that they're worthless and nobody's ever going to love them. A baby's born relatively pure and needing care and love. And then over time, it learns to trust its caregivers that they're going to do that for him, her. And then if that happens repeatedly, then you learn to trust the people are good and will take care of you, right? Somewhere along the way, that got broken for somebody who believes that they're not good enough. Parents yelling at them, school betraying them, whatever, friends telling them they suck, whatever it is, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 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 for sure.
That's the hook. The hook is I'm not enough. The hook is I suck. I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I'm lazy. I'm an idiot. I'm ugly. Now, why am I calling it a hook? Imagine you're walking around, you're a kid, and then all of a sudden this thing gets its hooks into you. It's like literally like in your arm, there's a hook. Well, that's painful. It was painful the first time you got it, but every time something pulls on it, every time somebody reminds you that you're ugly, every time somebody reminds you that you're stupid, and by that it could be like a teacher telling you, hey, you got another F, your parent yelling at you. Every time that happens, it's like that hook gets pulled on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It really hurts when that happens. It hurts emotionally, it doesn't hurt physically, but that's what I was saying before. We all develop these masks, these abilities to deal with that pain because you can't unravel, you can't lose it every single time somebody looks at you weird and you think to yourself, "Oh my god, are they looking at me because I'm fat?" You can't just lose it. You can't just start crying in the middle of the street every time that happens. So you develop this armor, this mask, this costume that allows you to protect your emotions, okay? But the pain is still happening inside. And what many people, not everybody, right? There are people that go through a lot of trauma and don't do what I'm about to say. But a lot of people find a coping strategy, they find a tool to help reduce the pain of that hook being pulled on. So every time they hear that, I'm just going to make an example. This is not a general notion of what happens. This is not a link between this hook and this behavior I'm about to talk about. But let's say that every time you think somebody's looking at you in the street because they think you're ugly, one of the ways you learned to deal with that when you were young was eating candy because eating candy made you feel good no matter what happened. Well, you're now 27 years old and you just had another one of those triggers. You're not even aware that you're doing it because of that, but next thing you know, you grab a donut. Everybody says you're addicted to food because you keep eating donuts and pizza and candy and ice cream. They're like, "Oh my god, you have a food addiction." I'm like, you don't have a freaking food addiction. You use food to deal with the pain of thinking you're ugly. If I take away the donuts, you don't think you're less ugly. And you're going to have to find a way to deal with that one way or another. So that's the point is we're looking in the wrong place.
God, yeah. So that's really interesting because that kind of leads to a point where, like, for example, if you look at people that are highly successful, right? Like really high performers, one of the driving traits is this feeling of not being enough, right? So they might
100%.
not have gone down the path of drugs or stuff like that, but they kind of find that relief for that void with success, money, praise, all that stuff, right? So it just manifests in different ways based on the person, which is pretty, I guess,
But I'll
interesting.
give you
And again, yeah, go ahead.
I'll give you an example. I use an example like that in the book. I don't even remember the name I used for the guy because I had to totally change this person's name because he's a very successful person that I didn't want to expose by telling the story. And he's incredibly successful. But that success comes from running away from his early life experiences that scared the hell out of him and traumatized the ish out of him. And so every time that he feels like he hit a new level, two things happen. Number one, it reminds him of where he came from, and it really, really scares him that he's going to lose it all the next day. And the other one is it sets a new standard, and he feels like he has to exceed it because he has to run farther away from where he came from. So I literally talk about work addiction as an addiction, success addiction, money addiction, right? That's an addiction. But it's the same like, look, when somebody's addicted to porn, we've all gotten this stupid idea in our head that they're degenerates that, have something wrong with their heads and that's why they really love porn. That's bullshit. It's not true. First of all, something like 30 to 40% of men hide their porn use from their partners. So there are a lot more men who use porn in a regular way. And why do they use it? Because they've never had a real training in intimacy. They want more intimacy, they want more connection with their partner, but they don't know how to ask for it. So they're resentful all the time. Or, you know, They don't ask girls out because it's scary. And so, well, why do I have to ask a girl out? I have female friends. I get the attention I want that way, but I get my sexual relief from porn. They're using the porn to deal with the fact that they're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they don't feel good enough in order to go ask people out. And it's like, if we keep thinking that you remove the behavior and everything gets better, we're just leaving more and more people in pain. And the point, and this is what I was saying before with the paint thinner or the gas or whatever, if somebody's in pain, they're going to find a way to escape the pain. The only way to deal with it is to help them release the pain. That's it. That's the only way to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's really really important because like the whole idea is to get to the root of the problem, right? Which is why you talk about calling people a porn addict or a drug addict, and these labels just don't help them because it changes their identity and kind of again takes them away from understanding the root, which is the hooks, as you talk about. And obviously, as you're saying, we have to get people to find a healthier, I guess, sense of relief with that pain, which leads to the different pathways that you talk about in your book. So if you can, would you go through these two frameworks that you talk about, which is, I guess, two strategies that you really use to help people overcome their addiction, which is the S.P.A.R.O stages of behavior and the EAT transformation cycle. So, yeah, can you
Yeah.
go deeper on that? And just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I say in the book, and this came to me as I was working with a lot of people, is I see people's behavior and I can understand why they're having it, or I can at least trust that there's something deeper going on that is causing this behavior. And so I would walk into it just wanting to help them find that issue and fix it. But the problem is, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, and we all have a version of this in our lives, but people who struggle with addiction have a really, really big version of this. Oftentimes, even the people who struggle with addiction don't understand why they keep doing what they keep doing because they don't want. Trust me when I tell you, if somebody's been struggling with this for 10, 15, 20 years, they've tried a bunch of times to get to the other side of this problem. You are not the first person that has told them that if they drink less or stop drinking, their life will get better, right? They might have had a DUI. They've probably had some blackouts. They've done stupid things while drunk that got them fired or lost them relationships. They know this is a problem. They don't understand why. And what I realize is when you don't know why you do what you do, it's even scarier than just the fact that you do it because you start mistrusting your own brain, right? You wake up in the morning, you say, "Oh, today I don't need a drink." By 2 p.m., you're two sheets to the wind, you're a bottle of wine or half a bottle of vodka in. You think something's wrong with your brain, which is why all those explanations that there's something wrong with your brain are so relevant to you because you go, "Oh, they must be right. I keep trying to stop, can't stop. My brain must be broken." So the S.P.A.R.O piece is a way to explain for people why they do what they do. And I'll start like I do in the book at the end. The O stands for outcome. Nobody in the world wants to stop drinking. That's a big generalization. Somebody's going to write me and say, "Hey, I really do want to stop drinking." I'm not saying literally zero, but the vast majority of people who come to help for alcohol, let's say, just as an example, they don't want to stop drinking. What they want is their life to get better or people to get off their back. Why? Because something bad just happened. So the outcome, S.P.A.R.O stands for stimulus, perception, activation, response, outcome. The outcome is the reason why people seek help, not the drinking. They seek help because they got a DUI. They blacked out and said something stupid to their wife or did something stupid and their wife is leaving them. They hurt somebody they love. They acted like an idiot at the Christmas party because they drank too much and they got fired or they're about to get fired, right? The outcome sucks, so they want to change. An important point to pause. Those are the best moments to change. Don't run away from them. If you're experiencing one of those right now as you're listening, use this model that I'm about to explain. But more than that, embrace the fact that because you just had a negative outcome in your life, because something bad just happened, you're more ready for change than you were yesterday. So that's a good thing. So S.P.A.R.O ends with outcome, but stimulus, perception, activation, response, outcome. Most people get caught between response and outcome. What do I mean by that? Somebody comes to them and says, "Hey, you got blackout drunk yesterday at the party and you danced on the table at the Christmas party and we need to talk. If that ever happens again, you're losing your job. I don't care that you've been here 15 years." Bad outcome, right? Nobody wants to have that conversation with their boss. Well, what you think to yourself is, oh, I drank, danced on the table, almost got fired. I shouldn't drink because if I don't drink, I won't dance on the table. The problem with that is you don't drink because you wanted to drink. You drink because of triggers that cause the perception away that you look at the world, and they cause an activation. And I'll explain each one of those in a moment. And that uncomfortable feeling you had in your body, whatever that was for you, is something you deal with through drinking. That's why you drink. So what people do is they try to stop drinking. They're successful for a day or a week or a month or 3 months, and then something goes wrong and they go back to drinking again. They have another stupid thing happen and they go, "Oh my god, I can't stop drinking," and they get caught in that loop. So that's where most people get caught. Is response outcome. Drink, life gets screwed up. Drink, life gets screwed up. I should stop drinking. I should stop drinking. I tell people the two best areas to change are actually the perception and the activation side. So I'll explain it in a second. Stimulus is the idea something happened in your life and it triggered a belief. Um, I'll just keep going with this work example. I'm making this up on the spot, so it's not an example I've
That's
used a
fine.
lot, but it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you've been feeling like you're underpaid at your job for 3 years and you're not getting the raise you want, and you feel like your boss is a little bit of an a-hole to you, and you feel like other people are getting promoted over you. So that's your perception, that's your belief of what's happening at work, okay? And earlier that day, before the Christmas party, the promotions got announced, and again, your name was not on it. Okay, name's not on it. That's the trigger. You saw the response. Name's not on it. The belief: I'm not appreciated in this company. I'm never going to get promoted. I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life. And the activation might be anger. It might be anxiety. When I talk about activation, I'm talking about primarily physiological activation, like the feeling you have in your body, but it could be emotions, right? So you're stressed out, you're angry, you're resentful, you might be anxious that you're going to be stuck here, right? Maybe fear. I'm never going to make more money. I'm never going to get a bigger title. That activation's been brewing around in your head for the last couple of days, and it just so happens that 3 4 days later there's a Christmas party. Well, you're anxious, you're stressed out, you're pissed off at your boss, etc. And then you go to the Christmas party, and in order you can't just lash out at everybody at the party. That's not a good look either, right? You start screaming people, this company sucks. They're never gonna. That's not gonna work. So what you do instead is you drink, and you drink
Mm-hmm.
enough to not care as much about the fact that you feel like this is a bad job for you or the boss hates you or whatever the thing is you have. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It does. It does.
Perfect. Now, if you hadn't stopped drinking, you still have the problem about being an employee in a place that you feel like doesn't appreciate you, etc. Now, by the way, Shaq, there are a ton of explanations. You could really be a bad employee, and then you have to get better training and become a better employee to get the promotion, right? That could be one of the reasons. Your boss really could have it in for you and not like you. Um, your boss could be the kind of boss that needs you to go to his office and say, "Hey, I've been here for 3 years without a promotion. I've been here 15 years overall. I'd like to talk about my compensation and what my promotion looks like for the next 5 years because I really believe I've done." He may just need you to go in and have a conversation with him. Maybe he just doesn't do it automatically. None of those things that I just mentioned are easy to do. And drinking is just easier. It's just easier. A lot of people don't like having hard conversations with their bosses. Does that make sense? So what we have to do is figure out, well, why aren't you having this conversation with your boss? Do you need to leave for another job? Do you need to talk to somebody? Do you need to figure out what it takes to get promoted? Do you need more training? That's the hard work. Most of us look for simple solutions. So for almost any addiction, there's a version of this. It's normally not very obvious. I just made one up as being obvious because I'm
Yeah.
controlling it, but most of us have to uncover what that is. So that's S.P.A.R.O.
Okay.
It helps you understand why. But what I talk about in the book is just understanding why you drink is not going to change your drinking. The only thing it's going to tell you is where you have to create change. So that could be the activation side, that could be the stimulus, the trigger, that could be the perception side. There's a response way that we can intervene as well. But now you understand where to do it. But I joke, like, what sports do you like to watch, Shaq?
I mean, basketball, Mixed martial arts, cricket. I mean, I love sports. So like sports in general is just really interesting to me.
Love it. Out of those examples, I'm going to use cricket because I don't even
yeah,
understand that game. You understand it way better than I do. So
yeah,
I'll say it like
yeah.
this. You could watch cricket for 15 years in your life, understand the rules perfectly, know all the players and their strengths, know exactly how somebody is supposed to throw the ball and hit the wicket, whatever, right? All the
Yeah,
different
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right.
Does that mean that you know how to play cricket? Not at all. If I put you out there with one of those bats, standing there, you would suck. You would be terrible. You've been studying cricket for 15 years. You know exactly how cricket works. You can't play cricket. The only way to change behavior is to practice replacement behavior. You have to change your behavior. So Sparrow is like learning what cricket is and how to play it. Eat
Hmm.
is like going out and practicing cricket. So eat, man, I wish I would have put an explanation like that in the book. That would have worked out really well. That was
Yeah, it's
good.
so good. It's so good. Yeah.
So eat goes like this. E is explore. You've got to go through Sparrow and understand where is the behavior problematic. Let's say in the example that I just used, you're a bad employee. You're not really that great. You're not as good as you think you are. So your perception that you're being underappreciated is not true. You're not meeting criteria to be promoted. You're actually not meeting the criteria. Well, you can be mad at your boss all you want. You're not going to get promoted. So now we do explore and we learn that. We go, oh, well, I think I'm really, really good. Well, what is really good at your job? Well, we go look and we go, oh shit, I'm not that good. I'm kind of average. Okay. You learn something about there's a problem in my perception. My belief that I'm really good is not mirrored by my performance. Okay. Now, for somebody that I would deal with normally, that probably relates to negative self talk that's happened forever. There's probably somebody who keeps pretending like they're better than they are because deep inside they think they're not that good at all. Right. So now we identified where we want to do the work. Explore is the part of eat. I think you can imagine if you thought for the last 10 years that you deserve a promotion and then now you just found out you're kind of just an average worker and you never really deserved a promotion. Is that going to feel good inside or not that good?
It's not gonna feel good.
It's not going to feel that good, right? So the next part after explore, once you understood why, is accept. Accept is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. Why? This thing we just discovered is something you've been running away from for probably years, if not decades. Maybe in your subconscious you knew it. Implicitly you knew it. There's a reason why I'm not getting promoted. Now you try to blame it on other people. And by the way, this is an example. I'm just giving one example, right? But you try to blame it on your boss. You try to blame it on your colleagues. You try to blame it on an unfair world. But in a reality, you're just not that good. That's going to feel terrible. Most people escape feeling terrible. They don't like
Yeah.
feeling bad. That makes sense to all of us, I think. So the drinking has been there to hide the bad feeling you have. Now we just uncovered it. You can't hide from it anymore. The next step is acceptance. What comes into acceptance? First of all, just being okay with learning something about yourself that you don't like, that is true, and that has been keeping you down. Just learning that about yourself. It sucks, but welcome to the party. We all have things like that. Okay, number one. Number two, forgiveness. Forgiving yourself. A lot of people say, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I could have fixed this 15, 20 years ago. If I would have known this 20 years ago, I would have gotten some trainings and I would have been better. What's wrong with me, etc. What Nobody has a time machine. I say this in the book, right? You don't have a time machine. I don't have a time machine. Sitting and just regretting what we've done for the last 15, 20 years is useless. It's not going to get you anywhere. Forgive yourself, forgive other people for whatever they've done in your life. Release all that energy because the moment you explore, E, accept, A, you're ready to transform. So that's E, explore, accept, transform. It's only when you know what you really need to work on and you've accepted that you haven't worked on the right things for the last 5, 10, 15 years, no matter how much money you spend, how many therapies you saw, all that kind of stuff, you're ready to
Hmm.
transform. But then transform to me is almost fun. It's enjoyable. Why? Because what you're saying then is, hey, here's the kind of employee I am right now. I'm just continuing using it as this example, right? This is the kind of employee I am. This could be the kind of husband I am, the kind of wife I am, the kind of boyfriend I am, the kind of rugby player I am, whatever it is, right? This is the man I am. I now realize where I really stand in life, and I want to get here. And now I understand for the first time in however long some of what it's going to take for me to bridge that gap. Now, transform is about going out there and finding the tools, finding the actual practices, the things that will take you from here to here. And for me, that's fun. That's like going and practicing your favorite sport because most of us care a lot about how well we do in life. Most of us want to be happy. This approach tells you where you're not happy, where you're lacking, and then how to go fix it.
Got it. Now, when you say transform, how does that look? Like, what do you do there? Because I mean, transform is like, do you just, I guess choose a different behavior? Because as you mentioned, it's more important to find a replacement, right? Because as you mentioned, eat is to practice cricket, obviously. In this way, practice actually overcoming the addiction. S.P.A.R.O is understanding the addiction, right? So, like, how does that transform aspect actually look?
Sure, 100%. So I'll give some really, really basic tools because first of all, everybody on this who's listening to this podcast right now, if you're not doing some of the things I'm about to talk about, you should do them whether you have an addiction or not, to be perfectly frank. But some of these things are just tools to make you function better. So I talked about anxiety and stress. Many, not all by any stretch, but many people who struggle with addictions struggle with anxiety and stress. What do I mean by that? Work, by the time you're done with the work day, you can barely breathe, right? You're just like on pins and needles, your brain is overworking. So what do they do at the end of the day? They start drinking in order to reduce their activation level. Well, breath work, meditation, regular exercise, regular sleep. A lot of people don't think that addiction has anything to do with sleep, or they say, well, you use drugs, that's why you don't sleep as well. But it also works the other way, right? Some of the most basic wellness and health rituals in the world are incredibly important for you to be able to handle the rigors and the stress of everyday life. So, most people I work with don't do breathing meditations or mindfulness exercises. Most of them have heard about it, but the idea that in order for me to stop gambling or in order for me to stop watching porn, I have to do breath exercises, it doesn't matter. It doesn't work because what they keep thinking is that they need to stop using porn, right? Or not stop drinking. Well, how's breathing going to help me stop drinking? Does that make sense? So, basic practices. Everybody listening here right now should study and practice 2 to 3 easy to do breathing practices that you can practice anywhere. Simple one is a box breathing exercise, right? You breathe, hold your breath, exhale, and hold your breath for the same amount of time. Start with something easy like 3 or 4 seconds, and then you can build up. That's one. There's breathing methods to increase your energy, right? Box breathing lowers your energy. There's Wim Hof breath, right? And kind of like that concentrated inhale to long exhale kind of moments where you actually are building up energy and increasing the the activation in your body. Learn a couple and practice them like we talked about. Just learning about them doesn't matter. You're not going to know how to do them by reading about them. You've got to practice them. And I recommend practicing them daily. Even if you only practice it once or twice a day, that takes you 30 seconds to a minute. Literally, everybody listening right now has 30 seconds to a minute to just practice different things like that. So when you need stress relief, when work gets really, really stressful, instead of turning for the bottle at the end of the day, in the middle of the day, you can already do 3 1 minute breaks of breathing and feel better. So that's just breath. Um, does that make sense
Yeah,
for
for sure,
starters?
definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The other one is like sleep hygiene. Too many of us really screw around with our sleep, and sleep is incredibly important. Um, like I have to get 7 hours. I can't if I'm not in bed for at least 7 hours, it's a problem. Now I normally wake up really early. Today is actually a good example. I went to bed. I normally go to bed between 9:30 and 10:30. I'm just giving my example because I wake up between 5 and 5:30. So I need 7 hours. If I get there at 9:30, I can actually get a full 8. But most of the time, it's more like 10. So I can get 7 and a half hours in bed. Yesterday, ended up going to sleep a little late. I had some things with my kids I need to do late yesterday. I moved my wake up time by 30 minutes because I need to make sure I get those 7 hours. Otherwise, I'm really dysfunctional. Each person listening right now will have a different version of that. Figure yours out and then stick to it. because sleep is incredibly important. Some of us have heard, but if you haven't heard, right, don't watch TV screens super late, especially not bright. If you do have blue blockers on or something like that, so that the blue light doesn't wake you up, you can look for some of these things that are important around sleep. So that's a second one. A third piece that I do, and I'll stop here in terms of practices, so we can move on. But the there's like 30 to 40 practices in the book, and you can find more and more by looking around. The thing is, what you're trying to solve is for the actual problem you're having. I'm not solving for the alcohol. There are tricks for that as well, but I'll talk in a second. I'm not solving for the alcohol. I'm solving for the problems that are driving the alcohol use. So one thing that I know for a lot of my clients is they have a really negative view of the world. Often they have a victim mentality. What do I mean by that? When something happens wrong in their life, they look for somebody else to blame for why that happened. Um, I really stress on them to try to take as much responsibility. I'll talk about that if we want to, but I have something I call the sphere of influence that I talk about in the book. So I think you should always start with yourself. Change is always easiest. It's still hard, but it's easiest with yourself. You don't control everybody else, so just start there. But one other practice that I help people with adopting is a gratitude practice. Um, Again, another one of those practices I think everybody should just have in their lives. Every day you can find things to be grateful for, even when life sucks, even when you just had a tragedy, even after a breakup or divorce, you can find things to be grateful for every day. And if you do that, it helps your brain find the good even in the bad. And that's a practice, because what can end up happening for a lot of people is the negative self rumination piece, where they just all the thoughts that happen in their brain are dark and heavy. Sometimes they look for relief from those thoughts in alcohol, drugs, etc. And so if you can start fixing that negative bias in your brain, you'll end up needing the drugs and alcohol less. So those are just some
Got it.
examples, but there are a
Hmm.
ton more.
Yeah. Okay. So just quickly, like, do certain practices work better for certain types of addictions? Like, for example, um, if you take porn, sex, and drugs, do different practices work better to help people overcome each one of those types of addictions, or is it going to be the same across the board?
It depends on the origin of the addiction. So for instance, look, most people that have a porn addiction, and there are probably some guys listening right now like going, shit, do I have a porn addiction? Um, and let me qualify that. If you're using porn instead of relationships, if you sometimes end up using porn and being late to a meeting, or not doing something else that you were supposed to do that hour, that minute, that day, because you had to watch porn, or, and this is potentially more obvious for some people, if you use porn for hours a day and sometimes literally hurt yourself, like because you're
Yeah.
using, you're masturbating
Yeah.
too much, then I'd think about potentially considering your porn addiction is compulsive, your porn use is compulsive. But again, the point is why? Why are you using it? So is it because your sex drive is really high and your current partner is not, and you are not having enough sex? Is it because you're single and dating is scary, so you'd rather not date, and so you're using it as a replacement for a relationship, right? A lot of people that have porn addiction have an intimacy problem, really. They have a relationship problem. So the practices we need for them are practices that, how do I shift the way I think about myself, or shift the way I think about dating or finding a partner, so that I can go out and do what I really want to do and not use porn as a replacement. So that's just one example. For alcohol, a lot of people use alcohol for stress. A lot of people use alcohol for social anxiety. Well, if you have social anxiety, alcohol doesn't fix your social anxiety. It actually just covers it up while you're drunk. But then when you're sober again, you're still socially anxious. We need to put in practices that get you out in front of people. We actually need to put practices that get you to practice what it's like interacting with others. So the point I'm making is transformation is always about finding the real problem and then going and practicing how to get better at fixing that thing. Like here. So I started drinking because I had social anxiety. To be clear, I still don't love going to places where I don't know anybody. I'm not a great networker in that way. Um, but I obviously have done a lot to fix my social anxiety. I go out on stage and to speak now. I do this all the time. But that's practice, right? Because of practice, I have less social anxiety, not because I stopped drinking.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So again, as you mentioned, it really comes down to what caused that, right? Again, for porn, lack of intimacy, oftentimes that's the case. Alcohol, as you mentioned, I guess for you, it was social anxiety. So, we can't really go too much in depth about that because, again, it's going to vary by person. And we only have a few minutes left here, right? So, Dr. Jaffe, this was such a good episode, but we'll finish off with one more question. Um,
Yeah, please.
something that you talk about in the book, which I find quite alarming, is when you mentioned that oftentimes people take like 18 years until they get serious help with addiction, which is shocking because 18 years is almost one entire generation, right? So
Yeah, no
when you
doubt.
wait like one generation until you get help, like that's not helping anyone because you're just going deeper and deeper into the hole, right? So, again, we only have a few minutes left, but if you can you tell us why people tend to take that long? And if you were to help people cut that timeline down to actually go and get help, how would you help them
Mm,
go down that path?
I
Yeah.
love that. So,
Mm-hmm.
look, first of all, yeah, the average is 15 to 20 years, somewhere in the middle of that. So,
Yeah.
and that's been going on for the entirety that I've looked at research. The reason is simple. We live in a society where admitting that you're weak is not really applauded. Now, again, to be fair, I don't know that there are a ton of societies where looking weak is applauded. I'm not saying we're different, but this individualistic, pull yourself up by a bootstrap. You could have come from the poorest neighborhood where people are shooting at each other. Your mom worked three jobs and never saw you, and you ate one meal a day. You should still be able to become the next Elon Musk because you know, America is the land of the free. It's, I mean, it's bullshit, right? Like Elon comes from money and had all the resources he needed at his fingertips to become successful. We don't really live in an equal society, but there's this idea. So what happens is when people don't perform at the level that they think they need to, and the reason I'm putting "think they need to" in quotation marks, that got taught to them from somebody around them, mom, dad, neighborhood, media, whatever. That gave them the explanation, right? Somebody could be totally happy bagging groceries at Ralph's. Like, there's no requirement. The requirement for money, and this is probably needs to be, I'll try to on the fly adjust this for inflation, but it seems to be, and there are a lot of people beyond this, under this line, somewhere above like 80, 85, $90,000 a year, and I think the numbers are per person if I'm really honest, but that's the research that I remember. Somewhere around that per year, more money doesn't predict more happiness. Let's even make it $100,000. Right
Mm.
now, again, a lot of
It
people
was
don't
like
make a
70K
hundred
or
thousand dollars.
something.
Well, the research was 75, but it's a little old, so I'm trying to adjust for
I
inflation.
got you. I got you. Yeah.
So
I got you.
so
Yeah.
let's say that it went up to 100,000 or $90,000 from the 75 original that I've seen, and somebody's probably updated that research. I need to look at it again. But the idea is, if you make $90,000, money is buying you the most happiness it can buy you. Everything else, more money can buy you more things, but it's not making you more satisfied with life. That's the idea. Again, to be fair, a lot of people are not making $90,000 individually. So let's also accept that. But my point is that if we don't feel like we're measuring up, the first place a lot of us go to is that there's something wrong with us. And that negative self talk doesn't feel like an error in judgment. It doesn't feel like a belief we can change. It feels like truth, right? If you've been told that you're a loser enough times and you're never going to be anything, especially as a kid, how are you going to believe that you're great and you can do whatever you want? You're probably not. You're going to believe you're a loser. The shift in the belief is something that is hard for a lot of people to see as a potential. And so they don't go get help for it because they don't even think they could get help for it. They think it's like gravity. You know what I mean? They go get help when the negative consequences of those bad behaviors over time get so massive they can't continue down the path they've gone through. Now, the average is 15 to 20. Heroin, opioids have sped that up for some people because one overdose, you almost die. It's very clear that the consequences are big. But like one brownout or one blackout, one stupid drinking night when you're in college, and people just say, "Oh, it's not that big a deal," and then you have another one a year later. Oh, remember the one you had the year before, right? So You have to be a very, very bad drinker and have somebody really point you in the right direction early. Normally, it just takes a long time for the consequences to catch up. Make sense?
Yeah. Hmm.
The follow-up question was, how do we help people cut things short? Part of my whole point in Unhooked is this. You don't have to call yourself an addict because that's not what matters in this equation. All you have to recognize is that the behavior you're engaging in right now is making things in your life turn out more negatively, more problematically than you like it to right now. And then you have to make the really, I'll call it brave decision, because change is not easy for all of us. You have to make the brave decision. This isn't working out. I need to do something different. I don't know what that something different is, but I'm going to go look. I'm going to go get help so I can learn it, explore, accept it, and then change it. Anybody listening right now, you could just be 3 years into your porn use and go, yeah, I think it's becoming a problem because I'm not going dating. You can be 1 year into your gambling problem and lost like 20 grand and say to yourself, oh my God, if this continues, it's going to get really bad. Some people get this when they really understand it from a couple of months or a couple of years of using a drug and going, oh, I could see where this is going. But it takes bravery because the consequences are not that bad. The work that you have to do to change it right now outweighs the negative consequences sometimes. And what happens for most people is they have to wait till the consequences are so bad that they don't have an option. But you don't need to. You don't have to. You can change today.
Got you. I completely understand that. Well, Dr. Jaffe, this was, as I said, such a great episode. I'm really grateful for this episode because we've been trying to book this for quite some time. So this was it's like 10 months or
Yeah,
something.
sorry for my
So
crazy
yeah,
schedule.
no, it's no problem at all, no problem at all. But obviously you have a lot going on. So if people wanted to go and find your work, where would you go and tell them to go?
So adijaffe.com, ADIJAFFE is one place. Another one, I'm going to pull out a book so I can show the book here in 1 second. Give
Yeah,
me a second.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, no problem.
So the book is called Unhooked. Um, and readunhooked.com is the website we have set up for that. But it's on Amazon. It was, you know, a bestseller on Amazon. Um, go find it there. It's available on audiobook as well and Kindle, obviously, and all other formats. So that's another one. And then if you're on social media, Dr. Adi Jaffe, DRADIJAFFE is where I am everywhere.
God, yeah, and if you can send me those links, I'll just like put them down below, and people can go and find it with more ease, and we can do that for them.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank
All
you
right.
so much, eh? This is great. You have a
Thank you for
wonderful
having
day. I
me.
really appreciate this. No, not a problem at all. Thank you so much. Take care
Have a great
now.
weekend. Bye-bye.